we've basically been domesticated, and this is the problem.
Natalie, how did you find carnivore?
Well, that was 6 years ago now. Dave, it really found me. For a couple of years, I had some very nondescript kind of GI issues, and no doctor really knew, what the problem was. I was kind of eating what you would call a healthy diet. I was eating spinach and kale and, juicing at that time, and just, not never been a big junk food eater. But I just constantly had these really niggly issues and ended up going to the doctor, and they said no, even went into hospital, had a biopsy. Nothing really was found. And then coming from a bodybuilding background of, eating 5 to 6 times a day, eating very high carbohydrates, very low fat, lots of dry chicken breast and broccoli for many, many years. And also weighing my food, counting calories, all of that nonsense. So what had happened as I'd kind of went along and just kept eating the same way, and, even when I wasn't bodybuilding, I was eating the same pattern. I noticed that every single time I ate, I would be starving, like literally 45 minutes later after I'd eaten some, sweet potato or eggs. And I was just constantly hangry. And my friends used to make fun of me all the time. And at this point too, remember, I didn't really understand what I know now with the knowledge I have now. But at the time, I ended up going, this is a problem. And I went to the doctor, and they did some blood tests, and he'd come back to me and he had said, "Oh, you're actually type 2 diabetic, you're borderline." And I was like, "What? How can that be real? Like, I'm 59 kilos, like on the outside, I look healthy, but clearly not on the inside." So he had said to me, "Look, we'll just monitor it. You're pretty healthy." And even that, in my mind, I'm like, really? You're telling me I'm borderline type 2 diabetic, but you're telling me I'm healthy? That didn't really make sense to me. So I ended up basically finding Paul Mason, and I really can't even remember, Dave, how I even found him on the internet. I was just searching, and then it came across low carb, and then I basically went down the rabbit hole with Paul, and he'd mentioned the carnivore diet and how, that reverses type 2 diabetes, which I wasn't really in that at that point. And I was like, well, that makes sense. If I've got an issue with my insulin and my blood sugar, well, why don't I take out the things that are making my blood sugar go up, right? So I read down the rabbit hole for like 2 days. And then on that second day, and then on the third day, I went, right, that's it. I'm going to jump straight in to carnivore. And I said to myself, I'll just do it 30 by 30 by 30, right? Because I'm like, well, am I really going to die if I don't have plants? That was a big question that I had. And I just went full in. And I'm very much the person that when I make a decision, I jump in. Every part of me jumps in, and especially when it comes to my mental and metabolic health. So it's a really, really high value for me. So I, after about 2 weeks, I was just like, wow, what is this? Like, I had so much energy. I was just sleeping really well, and I wasn't hungry. I wasn't getting that hangry feeling every single time. But when I first started, I was eating 3 meals a day and kind of snacking in between, just to kind of get my body used to having fat and protein. And then 12 weeks later, I went and had a blood test, and everything had gone down. Everything had reversed. I'd stopped being hangry. And the other bonus of that is my asthma went away, my hay fever went away, and my eczema just disappeared. So I've always had very dry skin as a child. and always had to put cream on and, had dry patches here and there. But that wasn't the reason why I even thought that the carnivore protocol would even do that. But 6 years later, here I am, still eating a zero carb carnivore way. And it's literally just the best thing I have ever experienced, both mentally and metabolically. And now that's why I use it in my practice.
What do friends and family think about this? Do they think you've gone crazy?
Well, my family and friends pretty much know when Natalie makes her mind up, Natalie makes her mind up. I don't generally go out into society for approval. I'm like, you know what? I'm trust my intuition. I follow my own beat of my own drum, and I've always done that. And that was something that my mum always, as a child, was saying: you never listen. You always do it your own way. You always go the long road, but you get there eventually. So I think that's just an innate part of me. But friends love me. They know, I'm an intelligent human being. If it doesn't work, she'll jump off it. But they started to see what was happening. Everything just got better, and I just couldn't stop talking about my energy, and just my vibration changed. I'd always had a really big vibration, but it just got better and better and better, and it still gets better. So yeah, they know me enough to go, right, she's on her path. She'll find her way.
And did you notice anything in terms of mental health, like anxiety and things like that? Anything changed for you personally?
Yeah, look, I've had a history of, kind of being in and out of what we would call, say, depression, but really it's probably more situational depression. And I've had anxiety where, I've had influxes in my body, and, just, I guess also to, um, as a woman, I think we also, go through a period of where we think our external physicality, is our worth. And I think that's why, with being a bodybuilder as well, that stemmed into that. Um, my mental health was also around counting calories and weighing my food, and really being quite rigid in that, which is literally a mental health, anchor. It controls every part of what you do during the day. Um, so 3 months in, that all disappeared, and I haven't had a problem since. I have no issues at all. I'm the grounded I've ever been. Um, I also practice stillness and other kind of, circadian rhythm protocols as well. But carnivore was the foundational practice of that for sure, 100%.
And can you talk a little bit about your practice and how you've been able to use carnivore within your practice?
Yeah. So as a integrative psychotherapist and, my training, I was always aware that food was a really, big key to understanding, what we put in our mouths affects us directly, metabolically and mentally. So I do combine, carnivore, a ketogenic protocol, and low carb, depending on, again, who the person is, what they're doing, where they're coming from, whether it's really long-term mental health and metabolic health, because again, we can't separate the two. So mental health and metabolic health is vice versa. They go hand in hand. So for me, using my psychotherapy, work and the practices and the strategies that I do use, then I implement a nutritional protocol. And most people that even start on a low carb, for example, they always generally end up being carnivore because they notice the difference. There is a very, very big difference in the feedback that I get from my clients between starting low carb, because again, we're all addicted to our carbs and our sugar and, what we believe is healthy, like our potatoes and chips and all those things. So a lot of people are just like, well, I can go low carb and slowly bring it down. But then what we do, we bring up the fat intake and then the protein intake. And then there's this little kind of window where they're like, well, actually, I don't need that vegetable. I don't need those blueberries anymore because I'm feeling great. And they naturally transition.
So, do you when you introduce the idea of changing diet, which it could be
Yeah.
low carb, keto, could be carnivore, um, do you get some people thinking, "Oh, this is all a bit too woo woo for me. This is I came here for to get some therapy and drugs."
Well, it's funny you say that because a lot of people, I guess find me on the internet and YouTube and they watch me for a while. So pretty much know when they come to me, they know where I'm going to take them. Because they've obviously been elsewhere in relation to, other therapy and they're still in the same position. And there's a pretty clear understanding. However, the other side of the practice that I have also is where I work with people who have attachments to alcohol. So, and I'm not just talking one or two drinks a week, I'm talking everyday long term alcoholism. Um, they're normally, because I get referred a lot of those clients, or, again, through the other pathways that I work in, they're the ones that are shocked because they've never watched me on YouTube or talked about carnivore. And also, too, they've been in AA for many, many years. And I don't know, Dave, if you've ever been or ever know anyone that's ever seen an AA room in a meeting. They're trying to get over alcohol, which is basically converts to sugar. And then when they turn up to an AA meeting, all they eat and all that's on the food on offering is cakes and sugar. No wonder it's a disaster.
Right. It's replacing same for same almost, right?
100%. Because again, not understanding our dopamine reaction, but also too, when you're attached to alcohol or even junk food, it's a relationship problem with yourself. So if you go to an AA meeting to give up alcohol, but then you're eating sugar, which is then going to trigger the same responses, that's why people go around and around. And I'm not saying that it doesn't work for, you know, maybe a lot of people, but I know personally the people that have been in AA for, I'm talking sometimes 10 years and they're still struggling, right? So when I introduce a ketosis protocol, they have no idea what I'm talking about and they have no idea of the concept of what that does in their body and even their brain. So it's a bit more of a gentle introduction because we're, looking at one attachment, which, we've got to be gentle and allow people to understand why their patterning and their programming is around that. But honestly, Dave, the foundation of using, and it's generally a ketogenic and a carnivore way of eating to help them get into ketosis so they know what it feels like, which they've never felt before. And that's what the body does naturally. So then they get a bit of a window of an opportunity to go, whoa, hold on. Then the cravings disappear. Then they feel good. And it's just a beautiful sequence from there.
Yeah. As someone who hasn't had a drink now for 2.5 years, I can say it's just amazing the level of self-control that it gives you.
That was the best way to say it. And, it's even that with junk food, you know, whatever processed food you've ever been attached to, that primal instinct of when you get your body into that state, you are literally like a lion in the jungle. You're like, right, when I'm hungry, I'm going to eat exactly what I need to feed and fuel myself with, and anything else, it just doesn't even get a look in. It's not even a thought anymore, which is just so, so powerful.
Yeah, I heard someone describe this a little bit like it's a little bit like being in ketosis, a little bit like the animal kingdom, you know? Like, so if you watch a lion who's just had a kill, just eaten and is relaxing or whatever, resting after he's eaten, and a wild boar or gazelle or something is going past, the lion's not
No,
interested. 'Cause it doesn't like, it's satisfied, it doesn't need to it's not like a dog, it's not gonna jump on every
no.
single thing that walks past, you know? And that's really what
Exactly.
it's like being in ketosis.
100%. It's 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 one of the most powerful things that you'll experience in your mind and your, your metabolic health. But in saying that too, it's the most grounded feeling you'll ever feel. So it's one of those things when you try to explain it to someone, you just can't, because you're like, well, I've got all this energy and I've got all this focus, but I'm not operating on what it would feel like to operate on 20 coffees, right? Or a fight or flight response. You're just so chilled, but you're alive.
Yeah, I think, like, I'm someone that can't really switch their mind off, and, it's always go, 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 but then when you start eating this way, it feels like you could just sit down and not be doing anything and just be content and not feel like I've gotta, like, what's the next thing that's gonna keep me busy? Do you think this is something that's still very niche, or do you think this is starting to grow in the areas of, mental health therapy, psychotherapy, that kind of thing?
Look, I think it's growing. Um, Probably not as fast as, practitioners like myself or Chris Palmer or Georgia Ede. They're kind of the pioneers of, I'm kind of trailing behind their awesomeness. Um, I think we are getting louder, and I think there is many, I guess, mental health practitioners that operate in more of an allied health way that are starting to really look at the information, look at people's stories, look at definitely what Chris and, Georgia talk about all the time. Again, psychological, psychological industry, it's still a lot of pushback. Same with psychiatry. I think that's we've got a long, long way to go, because there's a lot of, again, cognitive dissonance with understanding. Even I know people that are psychologists, and the ones that I know that have gone from changing their mind into then referring to integrative doctors for their patients to start eating a ketogenic or a carnivore way. So, but majority, Dave, still don't believe that, mental health and metabolic health and what you feed yourself can reverse schizophrenia or depression or anxiety, or, get you off your medication. And again, there is nuances to that. I think if you've been on meds, well, like Kerry Mann, that we met on the weekend, that was years and years and years. And what he's done for his brain and his mind and his whole being is just phenomenal. And I just think there's got to be enough support within the community to be able to say to people, take your power back, because you don't know what you don't know until you feel it. And then again, get into your own autonomy, take back your agency, and find people that actually will support you taking back your agency. Um, you know, the SSRI and antidepressants that are, literally written out within a 10-minute consultation. There is no questions around, tell me what you eat, tell me what your lifestyle's like, what are you going through right now? It's all relative, but they just don't do it because, again, okay, you're sad, you tick 5 boxes, okay, here's a pill. And sadly, when people are very, very um, unconscious and unaware, they'll just believe that because that's just the story. You've got a chemical imbalance in your brain, which is not true actually. And that's also a theory that was made up many, many, many years ago, which probably wouldn't, surprise many people listening. It was the kind of the Trojan horse for the introduction of SSRIs. There is no such test. It was a theory. That's what antidepressants were driven from. So, food is the driver of your neurotransmitters.
We really have had the wool pulling over our eyes from birth when you think that basically large companies have been able to convince us that we are fundamentally
Yeah.
broken, and we need to rely on pharmaceutical companies to keep us feeling okay, you know,
Yeah.
and we never stop and think, "Well, hang on, how come it's just us? How come the rest of the animal kingdom don't suffer this way?" You know, like, you never see a hippo waking up going, "Oh, no, I just can't face today. I need."
Yeah.
It's crazy. We are I mean, we've been indoctrinated this way, you know?
We've basically been domesticated, and this is the problem. We're a species that's been domesticated into a very, indoctrinated hypnotic patterns. And again, the psychotherapy that I use, and I really help people understand, how their mind works and how the environmental language patterns and the anchors of language patterns actually are driven for a reason that way. So, over mass formation hypnosis and the anchor of energy in those words, which is generally driven by fear. And this is not new. This has been used. I'm talking Stalin, Hitler in history. If you look back and look at all those campaigns, they're all the same. They are the same language. They get repeated. They get fear. Then what happens is when a human being is put into a fearful state, you will do anything without even consciously thinking because you're in fear. Oh, I've just got to do it. And that's the problem. We've got to wake up. We've got to take back our agency and become conscious. But also, too, understanding language is loaded. So what gets rewarded gets repeated. So you got to be very, very careful.
Yeah, but, you know, it's great that people are waking up now and people are realizing that, you know, I can take my power back.
Yeah.
I can I can feel better without needing to take all these drugs. It's really awesome.
It really is. I actually, just you saying that, a client jumps into my mind, and we've done the carnivore protocol, and 5 weeks in, she sent me a text message on WhatsApp and said to me, "Oh, I've just realized 5 weeks in, I've not had one thought since we started."
That's fantastic. That's so good.
Yeah. But you know what, Dave?
Mm.
She knew that there was something that she needed to do. And again, we just cross paths. And I always say, it might seem random, but it never is because nothing's ever random or nothing's ever by mistake when you run into someone, and it's got to be the right time. And she knew it was the right time for her. And as hard as it was and as difficult as it was, to jump in to do the work that I do, but it was like, well, what is the alternative? Me being in suicidal thoughts all the time and me wanting to, not be here. So 5 weeks in, and even now we're nearly 5 months in, and she's a whole different woman.
And, I mean, it's awesome to hear that kind of thing, but it's also, like, it's sad to think so many people are spending so much of their lives thinking that there might be a solution at the bottom of a box of tablets or whatever, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And as we know as a society, over 46% of our society globally is just, mentally unwell and metabolically unwell, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And, I would probably say 10 years ago it would be maybe 1 in 5. Now it's 1 in 2. And we've got to start asking ourselves the questions is what's happening here? You know, and I'll also share a story with you, which is just, it's mind blowing to me. I was in a room with a pediatric psychiatrist, and he was gloating about how many 8-year-olds that he has on SSRIs because they're depressed. I kid you not. My face, I was, are you serious right now?
What? Like, an 8-year-old, why would an 8-year-old even get to the point of thinking they're depressed?
Because they've been told they are.
Ah, okay. So it's the parents or the
Correct.
teachers or
An
something.
eight-year-old should never, never, ever, ever understand what the word depressed is. And the other thing is too, with patterning and programming and that family dynamic, if you're told that mum and dad have depression and then mum has it, then it's basically then given to the label. It's like, oh, well, you're going to get it. But as an 8-year-old, that should never come out of anyone's mouth, let alone giving them SSRIs that will undoubtedly change their chemistry, blunt them, numb them, and then you've got a whole nother level of issues when you go to get off them. It's like, well, what's the plan? As we know, most SSRIs don't work the first time. So, many people I know that have been on 4 or 5 or 6 of them because they're not treating the root cause. And the root cause is negative self worth, value systems, the way you've been programmed, your environment, what you watch, hear, see, feel, put in your mouth, you know, and that's such a puzzle that you've really got to put together correctly instead of just throwing a pill at someone, and especially an 8-year-old.
That's really scary to think of the age.
Yeah.
That
And
yeah.
there's also a thing called projected. Oh no, I've lost it now. Hold on, let me come back to it. Projected withdrawal. So, you know, you have sexual dysfunction, with SSRIs, and it's sexual dysfunction withdrawal. So, there's enough literature out there now to know that it does affect your hormones for one, but it also affects, how your libido, all of that as well. And there's two amazing psychiatrists in the world. Mark Horowitz, he's actually Australian, and also Dr. Joseph DeWitt. He's Australian as well, but they both operate out of the US, and they are huge components of getting people off, you know, these antipsychotics or SSRIs to be able for the body to get back to some normality. But again, when doing that, we've got to be able to support the body with the right food, the right movement, and again, calming and bringing the mind back to the present moment, and not thinking that there's something wrong with you. Like you said earlier, we all think that we're broken and that there's something wrong. There's not. There's just reasons for why we feel like we feel, but let's not ignore it. Let's not go around it. Let's explore it and let's go through it. Because when you go through it, you don't have to experience it over and over and over if you ignore it.
So if someone came to you and they're on SSRIs now and they want to improve their mental health, they want to get rid of the
Yeah.
SSRIs, what kind of time frame are we looking at? Like I imagine it's kind of a very slow titrating down of the SSRIs, no?
100%. So, especially when you go into a ketogenic and zero carb way of eating, because ketosis is a different fuel, right? So, your body starts to work and your brain starts to work very, very differently. So, you definitely don't make any changes for a minimum of 3 months because your body's got to get fat adapted. And then also, too, medication can change depending on when you're in ketosis and when you're not. And sometimes, it can be like if you're on say a 5 milligram, for example, right? And you're in ketosis, depending on the person and depending on the way that they methylate drugs and the way that they methylate their own, neurotransmitters and the chemist factory that we have, that can actually either make that 5 milligrams stronger or it can go in the opposite direction. So that's why you've got to be very, very nuanced and very, very slow. Firstly, to get the person's body so they know how that feels, but also, two, apart from the SSRIs, there comes a lot of emotional attachment with food. And a lot of the food that people use is to heal their comfort, or if they're stressed or they're happy or they're, sad, they'll use food to anchor that. So there's a whole pattern at that that's got to be managed versus, just again, you've got to taper them down very, very slowly. And a lot of doctors now, though, it's quite funny. The doctors will give them a reference range of, where they can go. And, well, if you drop it down and you feel a bit weird, well, drop it back up. But they're not getting any solutions. They're not getting the root cause, and that's the thing. And if you don't find your agency and you don't go and really take your power back, you'll be on them forever.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I was talking about yesterday. It does feel like, you go to the doctor and the doctor's quite happy to do a prescription for you, but they're not interested in finding out what the root cause of the problem is.
Nope.
They're not interested in finding out about diet. They're not interested in finding out what's going on in your life that maybe is causing this.
Correct. And, like a lot of the, people that I see that are, being, and some of them have been given antidepressants. They're like, no, everything in my body, I am not taking them. I know that there's something else that I need to do, which is amazing. And when you really start to pull all of it apart, there's trauma in some people's backgrounds. Someone's going through, they've just lost an amazing job that they've had for 20 years and their whole life has disappeared. They're going through a marriage breakup, and all of that then feeds into, well, how have you been feeding yourself for 20 years? And, again, when you go through those really traumatic, incidences, well, all you're ever going to do is go to the most, rewarding food, which is junk food and hyper processed foods, which is then going to actually feed the problem even worse. I know, clients that have been on them, and their first thing that they say to me is, I couldn't feel myself. My emotions were blunted. I was walking around like a zombie. And I'm just like, and I have a business to run. I have children, men or women, same thing, and, but they know that there's something else going on, which is generally, I guess I call it your intuition. It's saying, hey, let's treat the root cause, as uncomfortable as it can be, but it'll save you from basically turning off your emotional system.
Definitely. Um, so Natalie, how can people reach out to you? Do you have a website or any way of getting in
Yeah,
contact?
yeah, absolutely. So it's natalieewest.com and obviously on Instagram, and it's natalie.e.west. So if anyone is listening and something's resonated and it's, again, nothing arrives on your YouTube by accident, reach out. You can book in a 30-minute free call with me and we can have a chat and we can just see where you're at. And, and if my protocol is suitable, because again, you know, it's a confronting space to be when you've got to change, you really, it's breaking the habit of your old self and, trusting yourself, but also to me walking that path with you. So yeah, just reach out. We can have a chat and we can go from there.
No worries. Well, I'll link to your website and Instagram in the
Oh,
show
great.
notes. Thank you so much for coming on today, Natalie, and sharing your experience. I really
Thanks,
appreciate your
Dave.
time.
Awesome to see you again.